Welcome to n8n Blacksmith, Level 1, the Apprentice. In this chapter, we will discover the n8n interface, how to move around, how things work, and how to build real workflows from scratch. If n8n feels a bit intimidating for you, don't worry. We are starting super simple and I will guide you every step along the way. Hello, I'm Manu. I'm an entrepreneur and a coder since more than 20 years. I've shipped dozens of digital projects and crafted hundreds of automation with n8n. I created this course to make the process clear, accessible, and powerful. You really don't need to be a coder to use n8n. You just need curiosity. If you want to go deeper, to unlock more chapters and to connect with other builders, join us on the AI Atelier on Skool. It's a free community and it is where everything happens. Let's get started. Let's break down the welcome screen and main navigation of n8n. You will see it's pretty straightforward. You have on the left a navigation sidebar that you can collapse or not. The first entry overview gives you access to your workflows. So you have a list here of all your workflows. Then you can switch to credentials. A credential is a connection to a third-party services like Gmail or OpenAI. And then finally, you have access to the execution. So every time you run one of your workflow, there is a new entry here and you can access to it. On the right here, you have a create workflow button, and you can also use this button to create a new credential. After you have the personal space, it's a recent feature, they just added it, that allows you to be more organized. You can now create folders. At the bottom of the sidebar here, you have access to some templates. Templates are free and premium n8n workflow that you can start using. And then you have variables. That's only for enterprise plan lucky owner. You can add some global variables to your n8n instance that you can use in your workflow. I guess that's super handy, but I don't have the enterprise plan. Then you have access to some help, some documentation, the forum, some course, and at the very bottom you can sign out or access to the settings. This is the main interface of n8n, where you will be crafting your automations. At the top left, you can give your workflow a name. Then you can get organized by adding some tags. You have all the tags you created or the possibility to manage tags, like create a new tag, give it a name, or delete existing tags. Then you have the possibility to switch between the editor, which is the main view here where you craft the workflow, and the executions tab. An execution is every time you run a workflow, it creates an execution with a data set associated to it, etc. So here you have the history of all the executions of your workflow. This is very important to have an eye on that when you build, because you can see what works and what does not. And if something bugs, you can inspect everything in the executions tab. Then you have the possibility to activate or deactivate your workflow. So put it in production or not, to share it. This is a premium feature. You have the possibility to save your workflow, to see the history of your saved workflow. So if you break things up, you can find again what you have done before. Don't worry. And finally, you have some additional actions, the possibility to duplicate your workflow, to download the source file of your workflow, to import an existing workflow from a file or from a URL. You have the possibility to delete your workflow and to access some settings here. You are on a very good way now. I hope you like the content. If you do, please comment, like, and share the video. It will greatly support my work. This is how you start to craft your automations in n8n. n8n is a node-based workflow builder. It means that you can create some complex workflows that connect multiple nodes together. For example, I am currently creating this workflow for one of our clients, where you can see that we are connected several services like Google Sheet or OpenAI together with some logic, some conditions, and some other type of nodes. So building an automation in n8n is adding the right nodes and connect them together in the right order. And this is what we call a workflow. To start your workflow, so to add nodes to your workflow, you have several options. The first one is to click on the big plus button at the very center. You can do the same thing by clicking at the small plus button at the top right or by pressing Tab. This is opening the right sidebar here, which will offer you the possibility to add node. What we want to do is to add the trigger manually node. This is the most simple way to begin a workflow. I usually create my workflow with this node at start so I can try, and I replace the manually trigger node later when my workflow becomes mature. Now we want to add a second node to this workflow. Once again, we have several options, the plus here, the tab. And my favorite is to click on the plus button here and drag it where we want the new node to appear. We want this workflow to send an email. So here we can search for Gmail. This will add the Gmail node. And the Gmail node is offering several actions like add label, delete message. And what we want to do is send a message. This is opening the node panel, the Gmail node panel, and we can close it by clicking outside or pressing escape. To make the Gmail node work, we need to connect it to our Gmail account. To do this, we will be using n8n's credentials. Credentials are an important part of n8n. It is quite simple, but if you don't know what you're doing, it might be feeling a bit overwhelming. To add a credential for Gmail, we can open the Gmail node here, and at the top we see that it's asking for credential. In my case, I already have a credential set up, but let's see how I've done that. When you click on the credential, you can create a new credential. It's important to note that you have the possibility to have multiple credentials for the same service. That's very handy if, for example, your workflow needs to send email to two different Gmail addresses. You can have two different credentials for the Gmail service. When you click on Create New Credential, you arrive on this complex and scary screen. Don't worry, how to add credentials is very well documented by n8n. Here you have the documentation that explains you step by step how to do it, how to add credential for Google and for all other services. On the left sidebar here in n8n documentation, you see a list of all the credentials that are available for n8n. For example, you have the Gumroad credential for Shopify, for Strava, for Stripe, and of course for OpenAI. Once you have set up the necessary credentials, the node is ready to be used and you can start configuring it. You are doing great. Keep up. You are almost half of this first chapter. Now I need you to hit that subscribe button. I'm publishing videos about AI automation every week and you don't want to miss them. We have complete control on how we want to use our n8n nodes. For example, for the Gmail node here, we can start by choosing a resource. A resource is a type of object provided by the service Gmail that we will be interacting with in this node. For Gmail, we can choose between message, label, draft, and thread. For each type of resource, we have a different set of operations that are available. So for the message resource, we can choose between delete, get many, etc. and send, which is what we want to do. And for each operation, you will have different parameters available below. For example, for the send operation, we have two parameters, which is the recipient, the subject, and the message, the body of the email. You can see that you have a little tooltip near each parameter, which will give you additional information about how to fill this. So in our case, we want to say an email to myself. In the subject of the email, we will write hello world. For the type, we have two possibilities, text and HTML. HTML will allow us to do more complex formatting like having titles, images, lists, and so on. In the message input, we will write the content of the message we want to send. And below, we have the possibility to add additional options. So for example, for this node, we can append n8n attribution, add an attachment to the email, some BCC or CC, choose the sender name. For the sender email, it's simple. It is using the email address that we have used when we have created our credentials. All the resources, operations, and options are very well documented in the documentation provided by n8n that you can find here. In the node panel, you can configure your node as you want. At the top, you can rename it. That is very important, especially if your workflow is getting big, you might get lost. So let's rename our node Send Email. So what it does is clear. The node panel is divided in 3 blocks. The first one on the left is the input block. It's where you will receive data coming from previous nodes. You have the central panel here, where you configure the current node, the node you are working with. And on the right, you have the output panel, where you will get the data the current node is outputting and that you can use in the rest of the workflow. The central part here can be moved depending on what you want to look at, or it can be made bigger or smaller. To the left here, you have an icon that lets you navigate to the previous node, and to the right, of course, to the next node. That's very handy, so you don't need to go back to the workflow every time you want to switch between 2 nodes. At the top of the central panel, you have the orange test step button here, which is allowing you to test your step without running the full workflow. And finally, you have the possibility to switch between the parameters, which are containing the credential, the resource, the operation, and the options of the node, and the settings. The settings are more general. In the settings, you can define how you want this node to behave. Adding dynamic content to n8n is super simple. Dynamic content, that we can also call variables or data, is the core of your system. If we compare n8n workflows to the circulatory system of the body, then data is the blood that is traveling through the system. Each node receives data, work with the data, eventually perform an actions, and then pass the data to the next node. So to illustrate this, we will start to introduce data to this very simple workflow. Between our trigger and the send email node, we will add a new node, and I think it's the node I'm using the most. It's the set node, edit fields. This is super handy when it comes to manipulate data. If you want to modify the data that is provided by the previous node or introduce new data in your workflow. This is exactly what we want to do here. We will click here on add field and we will add a new variable. We will name it message, and here we will write the message we want to send by email in the next node. Hello, how are you? If we click on test step, then we see that we have something on the right in the output panel. We have the message, hello, how are you? If we navigate to the next node, the send email node, we see that we receive our message as a variable. Now what we want to do is to use this message here in the message panel. So to do this, we can just remove our text and we just drag and drop the message, and now we have a weird little text appearing here. This text contains the variables provided by the previous field, hello, how are you? Passing data in n8n is really essential. There are tons of subtleties and things to know. If AI automation is something that interests you, you should really join the AI Atelier, my free community on Skool, so we can discuss about our passion for automated solutions. The concept of input and output is absolutely essential in any system, and that's especially true in n8n. An input is the data that your node is receiving, and the output is the data that your node is returning. If we take a look, for example, at this Gmail node here, we can see that it receives in input some data. We see here that we have on the top the edit fields node, which contain the message. If we go back to the previous node, we see that the edit field is returning a message in the output. And then we have also when clicking test workflow, and this is empty because this node doesn't have any output. We have access to additional information in the variables and context, for example, the time. We have several options to see the input data, the schema here, the table, it's another way to display the data, and the JSON. In the JSON and table, you just see the data from the previous node here, but you have a switcher, a drop-down where you can select the node from which you want to see the data. This is exactly the same for the output. In the output, we have the schema, the JSON, and the table, and this is the output of this node. So this node, the send email node, is returning an ID and a thread ID and some labels, and this is what Gmail is returning us when you send an email. So basically this is the ID of the email that we just sent. While you are building your automation in n8n, it's very important to test your workflow very often. So for this, n8n offers several ways to proceed. The first one, of course, is this button here, the big orange button that you can access with the shortcut Command Enter, and this will run your workflow. As you can see, you have a little toaster at the bottom that says that the workflow ran successfully. And let's inspect what happened. The workflow has become green. All the nodes are surrounded in greens, and the line between the node, the connectors, are also into greens. And we see that we have a little text informing us that there is one item flowing between each node. So if we open the first node, we see that the output is empty. If we navigate to the second node, we see that the input is empty and the output will have a message. It's exactly what we wanted. And in the last node, we have the input, which corresponds exactly to the input of the previous node, and an output, which is the ID of the email this node just sent. So this is one way of testing your workflow and see that everything has been run. It's possible to remove the data of your workflow by clicking on the little trash here, up, and the workflow becomes gray again, and you can see that now all the input and output of all the nodes are completely empty. Another way to test your workflow is by clicking the test workflow button. Here it's doing exactly the same, but you can also run your workflow and test it step by step. This can be very useful in many cases. I just run this one and we see that this part of the workflow becomes green. Then I just run the middle node here, and then I run the last node here. So I can really have control over what I want to test and what I'm executing. You can see n8n as your crafting table on which you are giving life to your automation by connecting nodes together and building your own custom workflow. Your workflow can become very, very big. This is an example of a workflow I've done, which is maybe a bit messy with several parts. It's a full automation with image generation, content creation, article ranking, tagging, and so on. And it's important to be able to navigate. So for this, you have, of course, the zoom in, zoom out possibilities. You can see at the very bottom on the left, you can zoom in, zoom out, zoom to fit, and reset zoom to the original size. There is a new option offered by n8n that I want to show you here, is tidy up, and this will reorganize, realign all the nodes of your workflow like this, and hop, your workflow is super clean. This is it. You just watched chapter 1 of the level 1 of the n8n Blacksmith training. It is not just a technical course. It's a journey through the art of automation, where n8n is both the tool and the gateway. This training will teach you how to build powerful automations with precision and creativity. But more than that, It's designed to help you understand the architecture of the modern digital world. I suggest that you continue your training with this video maybe. See you around.